I've always had this sort of like, okay, so I did this and then that led to this next thing. And so it wasn't ever just like, oh, now I do this. And I don't know
Yeah.
anybody from here, you know?
Right.
So yeah, it's really about community and writing for other people so that they can sound good rather than to just showcase me in the best way possible. Like when I am writing for, let's say, even a string quartet, I listen to a lot of their recordings and kind of get to know who they are, what they sound good at. And also, I mean, we have two violinists that are completely different. So depending on who's playing first and second for my piece, I'd write the piece very differently, you know? So yeah, I think it's more people based than anything else.
This is Music Maker with Tyler Kline, a podcast from Loose Leaf Transmissions. How's it going, y'all? Welcome to another edition of the show. If you are new here, my name is Tyler. I'm a composer, broadcaster, and producer who loves talking with creative people about how they make their work and what drives them to create in the first place. There are now over 40 episodes in the archive for you to explore, so after this one, I hope you'll dig into some of those other conversations that I've had. And if you've been listening for a while, welcome back. It's so great to have you again. Today, I'm joined by composer Nicky Sohn. Nicky's music is jazz-inflected and rhythmically driven with a kind of vivid, colorful orchestration that tends to win over a room, which may explain why her Guitar Concerto No. 1 with Albany Symphony played to sold-out audiences and later landed at Tanglewood. Her work spans orchestral, chamber, ballet, and vocal repertoire and has been performed by the St. Louis Symphony, the Minnesota Orchestra, the National Orchestra of Korea, and many others. In our conversation, Nicky traces a path from an extraordinarily early start at the piano, I'm talking really early, to a pivotal turn toward composition, through burnout, a reset in Berlin, and a deeply supportive chapter at Rice University in Houston. We talk about community as the engine of her practice, the storytelling threads that run through her work, including Korean folktales, and how a love of jazz shapes her ear for motion and harmony. We also get into composing for real listeners rather than other composers, setting boundaries and building a sustainable creative life that actually makes room for joy. The conversation begins in just a moment. Before we jump into things, a quick note. If you want to stay connected to what I'm building here, like new episodes, behind-the-scenes thoughts, and updates on projects like Living Classical, my new independently produced radio show, well, the best way to do that is through the newsletter. You can sign up on our website, that's looseleaftransmissions.com, or visit the link in the show notes. Now, on to my conversation with Nicky Sohn. Well, Nicky, it is so great to finally sit down with you and meet you. This is our first time meeting face to face, and I think we've been connected on social media for quite some time, though. And I became familiar with your music, like a lot of composers' music, through a release. I think it was the Chelsea Music Festival, the piece that you wrote for them. Really wonderful piece, and ever since, your music has felt like a mainstay on my radio shows. So I'm really excited to get to know like the person behind that music and learn about your journey and what you're all about. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so exciting to be here. Yeah.
Well, where we like to begin here on Music Maker is as far back as you remember or as far back as you're willing to share, and that is, what is your earliest artistic memory as a composer or even just a musician in general, if those are like two different points?
Yeah, so I think it is two different points. So I started music really, really early. So, I mean, this isn't something that I remember, but what I'm told is I started reading and writing when I was 20 months. So I started playing piano when I was 20 months. So I've been really just doing music all my life. And I think the earliest, like, really visceral memory that I have of like being a performer was when I was like around like 8. I was doing all these like local competitions as a singer as an 8-year-old. And so one, like, I was like doing really well, but then there was one day that I was literally like so sick. I had this like horrible cold, but I still had to go up and like sing. And funny enough, I was singing about icicles, and I had this like, nasal voice, and I was singing, and I didn't win that day. And I cried so much, and my mom was like, well, like, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. And I was like, no, I gotta try harder next time. And like, just like thinking about that, I think, I don't know, I've always like had this like passion for music, but also it was something that like really pushed me forward as a person, like work harder and like get better. Because like in music, I feel like we're always like reaching for something more, right? It's never
Exactly.
enough. Even as like a composer, like I listen to my pieces like from the past, and it's like, oh, like I could have done that a little differently. I feel like even like recent pieces, I'm like, oh, that wasn't, so I feel like that sort of like mindset began really early, and it was like self-implemented, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And as a composer, so I was like doodling around and like improvising since at a very young age, but having my piece be heard by somebody else, that was around when I was like 16. So I was at Manus learning piano, and then I met teachers who became like really important to my journey, but like I didn't necessarily study. I was like basically like playing for them, and like it was a part of an interview and audition. But then this one person was very blunt and honest about my piano playing, and he was like, why do you want to do this? And I was like, well, so I love like creating my own music, and I've been like improvising my like pretty much entire life. And he was like, play something for me. And so I did at the spot, but I was like crying so much
Yeah.
because he basically told me that I'll never be the pianist that I want to be.
Oh, wow.
I
Yeah.
know, but like, I mean, I'm so glad that like somebody was very honest about it. I think it's hard to be so honest as a teacher. Like, I teach a lot too, but you want to be encouraging, not like, fortune telling. But this guy totally fortune like was like a fortune teller. But yeah, so I did that, and he immediately said, "Okay, you're gonna be a composer."
Wow. Yeah.
So I think those are some of my early memories of like being a performer and being a composer. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much to unpack in everything you just said, and I'll try not to dwell on it too much. But when I was doing research, getting ready to prepare and talk to you, I did come across a previous interview you had done where I read you said what you just said. You started playing piano at 20 months,
Yeah.
which is the first time I've ever heard anyone refer to them beginning music in terms of like months. And it's funny that you say you don't even remember it. So I mean, that seems like it's just like music has just been, a part of your life in a way that like, well, I don't think any of us remember the moment we started speaking words either,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
that's really that's fascinating. I mean, why so soon? Do you
So
know?
yeah, so my mom tells me that so I started going to like daycare really early, right? Because like she was busy and my dad was busy. And I guess like I was always very curious, and I was always like bored. So I would like look around and like ask what things are all the time. But I guess like one day I came back from the daycare, and I started playing Brahms lullaby on a toy piano, and my parents like totally freaked out. They were like, where did you learn to do this? And they were like, maybe this is like normal for kids, because I was their first kid.
Yeah.
And then so I guess my mom brought her parents to my place and told me to do it. And then my grandpa was like, okay, I'm getting you a piano, and she's gonna have lessons. And so I guess like that's how it began. But yeah, my parents were interesting though, because like they were always very encouraging and very supportive of my music education and training. But they really weren't so into the idea of pursuing it
Mm.
professionally.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm Korean, and so you can imagine what kind of jobs they wanted me to have, like
Yeah.
lawyer, doctor, like
Oh yeah.
those, the basic stuff that like they love. And my dad's also a lawyer, so that's all he knew. He thought that everyone had to be a lawyer, and so he was like, well, like it's cute and all, but like you gotta get serious. And yeah, even now, I think they kind of don't understand what I do in like a full like
Yeah.
term. But my dad, even now, like, I have like a full career of like doing this. And I've been doing it for like so long at this point, and he came to like my graduations, and he knows that like I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
But even now, so my sister just became a lawyer,
Mm.
and he was like, it's never too late, you can always go to law school. And I'm like, I don't even know how to read. I went to
Yeah.
music schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's funny, yeah.
So you said that you were 16, auditioning for Manus, or you were some kind of
Right.
audition on piano, and then the guy was a little mean, but also said you need to be a composer. You had been kind of improvising, or had you written down like a piece of music on paper? What was that first moment like for you?
Right. So, going back a little bit, so I started school, like college, a lot earlier than most people. So graduated from high school when I was 14 in Korea, and that's when I came to America. Literally for 2 years, I was just practicing piano. I would log minutes and seconds of how much like time I was putting in. And I mean, looking back, I don't even know what kind of practicing I was doing, but like I was practicing all the time.
Yeah.
And so I was a piano major at Manus when I was 16, and I was trying to like change teachers and like meet more people, because like that's just what you do as a performer. You play for other teachers. And yeah, and it was a lot harder than I had ever imagined. I was still very young, and I had all these like hopes and dreams about being a performer, because I think that was also the only thing I knew. I didn't even know being a composer was a thing.
Yeah.
I thought all the composers were dead.
Yeah.
And then I was always like writing things down, but not necessarily in like legible forms that people can understand. I would like write literally like solfege names or like lines, and like it was almost like a code language that like made sense only to me. And then I started actually writing music, like notating it, when I was around like 16. I got a finale. My friend was like, you can do it this way. And then I was like, oh my God, nobody showed it to me. And then I was just like literally typing so many notes. And I was like, whoa, like this is a thing? Yeah.
Yeah. So much of what you're saying, I feel such similarities to my own story, in that other than like I didn't take piano lessons until I was maybe like 13 years old, when my parents were like, "Oh, he seems to like music a lot." But at any rate, it was same kind of thing where it's like I had access to a keyboard instrument and would play melodies that like my parents would be like, "How did you learn that?" And it's like, "I don't know, I just heard it." And then just like composition, I think naturally came out of that. But I didn't meet an actual composer. I didn't think about like, oh, definitely in high school, I was aware like, oh, I can maybe do this for a living if but I don't know what that path even is. But still, like, I felt compelled to compose. And then it was like when I met my first composition teacher, really, that things really just blew wide open for me. So I'm curious, like, who was that person for you? When was the first time that you like met a composer in real life?
So it was my first teacher too. I mean, I had like seen composers, but I was like, okay, sure. But
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
my first teacher was David Simpides and Manis,
Mm,
and I showed him my music that were like written down and whatnot. And looking back, that they weren't much of anything. It was things that I had written by myself, and I didn't even really know how to properly notate. And now when you notate something on Dorico, for example, it just fixes it for you. But like finale, like it just looked. I mean. So he like heard my music and then looked at it, and it's interesting because in music, when you're meeting young composers, young musicians, you have to just kind of like go with what you think their potential is and just believe in this person and take the risk, right? And he was like, I think you're gonna be great. Like, I think you are a composer. And I was like, okay, well then I guess. You know? And that sort of support was really important to me because as a pianist, I think I was always told that I'm bad. Like
Mm,
I wasn't good enough, I wasn't winning enough, I can't do this. Like I mean, there are just too many great pianists who are always going to be better than me, right? But as a composer, I think this sort of like individualism was more important, and like people could kind of like look past on what I'm doing right now, but like they can kind of be like, okay, but if you did this, maybe you can do this, like they
right.
were always like willing to like teach me more things.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before we started recording this about the competitive nature of music composition. It isn't without it. We all apply to the same things. There's limited opportunities. It's just the way it is. But it's even crazy. I hadn't even thought about like how much crazier it is on the performance side. And again, like that was something I hated. I hated auditioning. I hated practicing and getting ready for auditions on my instrument. And so I think that again, that like naturally inclined me to composition as well.
Right, absolutely. And also like as a composer, you have already written the piece and you print it. I mean, back then we printed it. You print it and then you bring it and that's done. But as a performer, you could sound fantastic in practice rooms, and then you go on the stage and it's just somebody else, like you're so nervous and maybe that day you're feeling certain way. I don't know, that was really tough. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really curious because you've already kind of laid out your timeline a little bit, but can you share more of an overview or connect the dots, so to speak, of your creative journey and whether you feel like you followed a more conventional path, which it kind of already sounds like maybe you didn't if you were starting college at 16 or 14, or do you do feel like there were some unexpected twists along the way from these first moments of composing to today?
I think it's both. I think it's both for most composers too, because everyone's career looks different. Yeah, and we all are composers, but we're such different people. So I was doing piano for 2 years at Manus. So I started composition major when I was 18. So I was almost like back in this like
Yeah.
regular routine of like school. But again, like I think within my life, especially in my 20s and like coming to this like today, there were just things that were unusual that people wouldn't have done, but at the same time it is very like common to have gone through like so many schools. For example, like I did the general route of doing undergrad to masters, and then I went to actually UCLA for a little bit to start my PhD right away from my masters at Juilliard. And it just wasn't a good fit for me. I think some schools are just not right for you. And
Yeah.
especially having gone through conservatories, going to a big university and that sort of program was a big shock to me, and it just didn't work. So I left school for a little bit, and I don't know, like some things I've done in my life, I look back and it's like I can't believe I did that, but I just didn't want to be around people and the competition that you were kind of talking about. I felt really extremely burnt out after Juilliard, and then UCLA. Being in LA was totally different. It was just too much. And so I decided to just pack up two bags and move to Berlin.
Oh
And
wow.
so I had some work in Germany before deciding to move. So I worked with the Stuttgart Ballet the season before, and I absolutely loved being in Germany and just like being around like people that I don't know. And also, it didn't matter if I were a composer or not. Like it was just like a new country, new scene. So I decided to just go to Berlin. Also because it was between Paris and Berlin, but back then I was so poor and Paris was just more expensive. So I was like, okay, I'll go to Berlin. So I was there for about 3 months, and I did absolutely nothing. I didn't write a single note for the 3 months, even though I had like some commissions lined up. I was like, I can't do it. And I didn't have an access to a piano for the first time in my life, pretty much. So didn't play a single note on the piano, didn't write a single note. I was just walking around, going to museums because I had this like student museum pass. And I went to Berlin Film concerts. I went to Oktoberfest, like
Yeah,
these
yeah.
things that were, I don't know, like I felt so lost in my life back then because I thought it was over, like I left UCLA and I don't know, I felt really defeated in life and like music that I was like, whatever, it doesn't matter. So I went. And then I don't know. I came back to Korea and spent some time with my parents, which was really nice because I had not done that since I left home, right? Which and so that was very nice. And then I decided to go back to school because that's all I knew, I think. So I applied to a bunch of schools in London and like, a bunch of places in America, but I ended up going to Rice. And going to Rice was an interesting experience for me because, I mean, truthfully, when I was applying, I didn't even know where Houston was. I was
Yeah.
like, well, it's a good school and, it's a good program. So I also showed up with two bags in Houston. And it happened to be the best decision I've made in my life to go to Houston and relocate and go to Rice. But yeah, I feel like I definitely moved around more than other composers. And I also, yeah, I think like I've had all these like moments where I was like, I need to do all these competitions. But at the same time, I think I quickly learned that like it doesn't really matter, because I signed up to be a composer because I wanted to write music, not because I wanted to compete.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was like a loaded like answer, but yeah.
No, no, it's perfect, and, hearing about your experience in Berlin is on one hand surprising to me, but on the other hand, it, like, makes total sense, and I don't know, I've thought, long and hard about this, like, productivity as an artist and as a composer and how, like, sometimes it feels like, at least for me personally, like, the weight of the world is on my shoulders to keep producing, like, to stay as I've heard some people say, like, stay on top of the stack, in social media and, programs and all that stuff, and I think there is a fear that we all kind of have where it's like, "Well, if I just take a break, are people gonna remember who I am, like, when I come back? Am I gonna be able to, like, pick back up where I left off?" And I think the answer is almost always yes, even though we've been conditioned. I think it's capitalism, actually, and
Yes.
I don't wanna, like I don't wanna go down that rabbit hole, but, I think capitalism has kind of conditioned us to, like, be hyper productive and, like, keep going against all odds when it's like, as artists, we need that time away, and, I mean, gosh, like, even, like, going to a new place, I can just imagine how much inspiration you got from just doing that, like, no notes, no piano, like, whatever, like, that doesn't matter, like, you're in this new place experiencing all these things. How can that not fuel whatever comes next? You know what I mean?
Right. Even just as a person, I think it really helped me to grow, to have that like moment of break because having gone through all these schools, like you're just constantly in that scene and you're like hearing things and it's just I sometimes, I don't think it's a good thing to be just constantly listening to music even. I think it's really important to just not and be away from it because as a composer we're writing all the time, so I have my headphones on pretty much all day unless I'm in the kitchen. And so I think just like not hearing anything in the gym or like just like when I'm walking around, it's so important to me just like to have raw ears without headphones. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's time to start really composing something when I get sick of all music, when I'm like, "I can't listen to anything else." That that's how I know it's like, "Okay, I need to, like, actually start writing something." So,
Yeah.
totally relate to that. I do wanna ask you about what you said about rice, that being the most important decision you've ever made because, you were talking about kind of you were in New York City, then you went to LA, and I think as again, like, the new music field kind of puts a lot of emphasis on these coastal cities, which I think is well warranted, but also there's all the places in the middle that are just as vibrant in their own ways. And so you show up to Houston and you said you couldn't even like find it on a map or you didn't know where that was on the map.
I was like, well, it's Texas, you know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And we all have our opinions about Texas as well, for better or for worse. And so I'm curious like what about that experience was so galvanizing for you?
New York and LA are highly saturated music scenes, right? And especially an environment like Juilliard. I don't think like anybody says, "Oh my god, it was such a nurturing experience." It just isn't, you know? It is really intense, and even just to like get through the classes, it's a lot. I don't think anybody has a great experience in Juilliard year training classes. We all talk about it, so I'm not like just bashing on it, but like it's you are almost programmed to think that there's nothing important in the world but to like be able to solfege better than anybody else. That's ridiculous, And I think I've always had that mentality, and that music had to be difficult. I have to suffer. Teachers have to be mean for me to learn. Like it was just like minimal trauma every single day just built up, and I was always so anxious and like it just wasn't a nurturing environment. But then Shepherd was completely different. I mean, the reason why I considered Rice in the first place was because people who have gone through that program only had nice things to say about it. And I was like, that's really sus, Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I always say like the places that I'd been before, they definitely helped me go forward with my career, sure, and got me opportunities, but I only have really harsh things to say about how it's run. But I mean, everyone's like, yeah, like it's like the best place. It's like this like dream world. And I was like, okay, like I guess I'll try it out. But it really was true. I mean, the teachers at Rice, especially the comp department, I mean, every department, but really comp department, teachers never really thought of no as an answer. If I had a project that I really felt so passionate about, they will find a way for me to do it. They were always advocating for me, and they were so supportive. And I mean, they would meet up with me whenever I wanted. And I really also loved how it wasn't so like, you're my student and like like you have to be doing like what I tell you, but it was more like we rotate teachers every year, so you really get a sense of who all these other people are too, rather than like these conservatories where you study with the same person no matter how long you are there. And so that was really incredible. And I was there during the pandemic, and during the pandemic things were really I mean, we didn't know what was even happening really at first, but I was there with a student visa, and at first that was very unstable, and like we weren't sure what was going to happen. We People are also saying that like we might have to go back to our countries or whatnot. But then Rice did everything they could to protect us, and I don't know if schools are really like that, but they cared more about my well-being and my hopes and dreams than anything else. And I mean, who does that,
Yeah. I do not have a doctorate and I have not taken part in a doctoral program, but I pretty much everyone I know has. And I it's such an interesting like there's so many varied experiences like what you're describing. And I know people who have like started and not continued in some programs because of things like, well, I brought in this like piece I was working on for this professional commission and they told me to stop writing on it because I need to like focus on writing for, groups in the school And it's like, that's crazy.
That
Like,
is crazy. Yeah.
a doctoral program, it almost seems to me like it should be like you're almost like a peer with your teacher. Like it's someone you can learn from and someone who nurtures you. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I wouldn't want to be treated like I was 20 years old and not knowing what I was doing in a doctoral
Right.
program. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And also, Houston is a really interesting place, and I think people are learning more about it. There are so many opportunities in Houston, musical opportunities as a young composer or young artist, more so than anywhere else that I've been, really. I mean, it's big, but it's also not as big as New York or LA. There are just a couple schools that have like music programs, right? But there are so many new music ensembles. There are a lot of chamber groups. There's the big opera hall, orchestra. I mean, Houston Symphony is great. They all are doing new music in some capacity. And I think you're more likely to be recognized there than like New York or LA, where it's just so hard to break through that, shell. I really think it's like a bubble. But Houston, like, if you are hoping to meet performers and such, it's like not that hard. You go to the concerts, it's a lot more intimate, I think. Also, the funding's great. I really think that being in Houston helped me to kind of learn who I am as a composer and what I wanted to do, because I got to really do everything that I wanted and try things out. But yeah.
Yeah, and I've lived in similarly sized cities like Tampa and Cincinnati, where I live now, and I feel the same way. It's like I'd much rather be here at this point in my career. I don't know if I'd ever want to move to one of those big cities, but it feels like this is the right size to be a working composer.
Right.
It's
But it's funny because like I talk about it, as if I'm still in Houston, but I'm back in LA. I'm
yeah,
living in Long Beach, which isn't like totally LA, but it's LA County. But I mean, I'm sure like we'll talk more about this, but I think the recent 2 years or so has really changed the way that I think about music and this career and this industry. And so coming back to LA, I wasn't so like anxious about like, oh my God, I gotta meet everybody. I need to like reconnect with everybody. I think it's like something just changed in my head that I'm not like going out there to every new music concert anymore. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Well, before we do get into that, when did you know that you wanted to pursue your craft as a career, or maybe like what was the defining moment where it's like, okay, yeah, I can do this, I can like make a living doing it.
I think that came a lot later. I think I just was doing it because I mean, I first of all, I don't think there's anything more fun than composing. I mean, of course it's like hard every single day, but as a whole, I'm always so excited about writing more music and hearing what I wrote, even if it like turns out to be terrible. I think there's always like something to learn about that experience. And I think it's almost like keeping a musical diary. Like when I hear my music, I can like definitely locate where I wrote that exact measure and like why I wrote it. I think that's a really fun, exciting part about being a composer. But I think when I was like, okay, yeah, maybe I can be a real composer, was when I met Gabrielle Lena Frank. Before meeting Gabby, I didn't really see female composers before. Like, especially in New York back then, most composers that were having their pieces performed on like the big stage, they were male. They were white male composers, and I really hadn't seen anybody who looked like me or women of color, like so I vaguely thought that yeah, I'm a composer, but I didn't really know what that meant or what it could look like for me going forward. But meeting Gabby, so I met Gabby at Aspen. I think it was like 2017 or yeah, something like that. 16, 17. I mean, she's first of all the most generous, the kindest, warmest person I've ever met. Like definitely more so than my mom, you know? And like she like gave me a hug and I was like, "Oh my god, this is the motherly hug that I've wanted my entire life." You know, I like there's this like energy that she has that like literally being around her makes me want to like cry and like tell her everything. And so yeah, she was very encouraging of my music and me right from the beginning. She invited me to apply to her academy, and being in her academy, I think, shaped my career. And like just seeing how she uses her compositional voice, it was like I don't know, new way of thinking about my career. It wasn't just about like, you know, winning these like annual competitions that everyone applies to, but it was more about being like creating a safe environment for people to express, having this sort of like community. You know, I never thought about being a composer as like having a community. I thought we just hated each other, you know, but
Right.
it didn't have to be that way. So yeah,
Well, and that like that idea of like, oh, we have to hate each other. I think that's a very like academically institutional sort of rooted
absolutely.
idea, and it's like, yeah, at least the further I get away from that. I mean, I had really great experiences. Well, in grad school is the only time I studied composition, but you know, despite having great experiences, it's easy for me to recognize like these things that you're talking about. It's like, yeah, when I get to be a composer, kind of away from all that is when I get to shine. And I think that's what you're talking about with what Gabriella Elena Frank fosters with all of her work. You know, it's not
Right.
institutionalized. It's not very academic. It's like it's about people, I imagine.
Absolutely. And it's about the things that she believes in, right? She has this whole cohort where she invites composers to learn about the impact of climate crisis. And after going through a year of lectures and reading, I mean, it's like rigorous. You really do have to put in the work and you have to learn and be aware. After that, you write a piece based on what you've learned and your experience having learned all this, you know? And I think that's incredible. You know, you are giving people a space to learn about something that's deeply hurting the world, and you're also giving them the opportunity to express their in their own way of like all of these problems like musically. You know, I think music is, as cliche as it is, like sometimes easier to digest than like an article or like just a lecture. I mean, I admire her so much, you know. She could be doing anything and everything, you know, but she's choosing to be very specific about how she spends her time and energy, and it's really incredible. I don't think anybody has really looked at composer's career like she did.
Tyler here, breaking in just briefly to tell you about something I think you're really going to love, and that's Living Classical, my new independently produced radio show. And if you're listening to Music Maker for the ideas and philosophies behind how composers think, well, Living Classical is where you hear how that music actually comes to life. New episodes release weekly on Sundays at livingclassicalradio.com or on our Mixcloud page. I think bringing up Gabriella Elena Frank is a perfect segue for my next question because she really draws on her own background and her identity and a lot of her work, and so do you. So, you know, your work is just so deeply connected to your Korean heritage, and I love that you shared with me before we met that two of your current projects are based on Korean folk tales about bunnies. And so, what initially pulled you towards those types of stories, or even just like pulled you to draw on your own identity in your work in this way? And what do they open up for you musically or emotionally?
Like at least for me, it's impossible to not write about the things that impacted me in my life, right? Like I grew up in Korea, and I think that experience definitely shaped the way I listen to music, the way that I write music, and you know things that I listen to. It's different. I see a lot of like my friends who grew up in America, and they know a whole different set of like pop songs and like music that they just like listened to growing up. But like I listened to K-pop in its like pretty much original form growing up, and so I think, eh, even if I want to like get away from all of the influences that it's had, it'll be impossible, and I think it I mean, I kind of like got into classical music as a pianist, but learning about orchestral repertoire and like chamber, that came a lot later once I
Mm,
became a composer, like, or like, I tried to
yeah.
be a composer. And so I think hearing those pieces, there are always like these pieces about like old like Greek literatures and like mythology. Like there's like recurring like themes in these like pieces that we listen to, and I think I can do the same with like Korean folk tales that I grew up with, and they're I mean, they definitely bring me back to my childhood and my experience with my mom, grandma, and I always feel this like nostalgia towards those times because I don't really get to see them very often. I'm so far away from them. So it's like one way for me to sort of like have the feeling of like being at home and like thinking about those times, but also introducing where I've come from to classical music.
So what are these? Can you talk about the bunnies? Just
Yeah,
curious.
okay. Yeah, so there's so one of them is about bunny and a turtle. So
Mm,
this turtle is basically like a government secretary for this king that's underwater, and he's like super sick. And so people are like, well, not people, but like I guess sea creatures are like, oh, like if he eats bunny's liver, he's going to be cured and live forever. And so the turtle, because like turtle can go in between water and the land, he's like, you know what? I'll go and get it. And so it's about like this adventure of the turtle trying to find a bunny and then bring the bunny back to the sea world and all that. And then the other one is about bunny and tiger. But so another really like thing that I love about writing about these stories is that I think music is just so abstract. I mean, it is, right? And that it helps me and also the listener to have something to follow along. I think, I mean, I write a lot of music. I write fast and like I don't really do anything except for like writing music these days. But even now, just seeing like a completely empty first page of Dorico, it's so scary. I have no idea what I'm gonna do. And when I don't have any sort of like limit, it's just you can do anything. Therefore, you can't do anything. That's how I
right.
feel.
Yeah.
So I kind of need to know about like what I'm writing about, what the piece is about, where the climax is going to be. I need to know a lot before I can start. So I usually start with the title. So like pulling from these stories, it's always very helpful because I have a clear lines of like the narrative that I can find and follow. And so basically, like these two bunny pieces are gonna be split into like 10 to 12 sections, and so it's like little miniatures of like events, and that really helps me to narrow down what the music is gonna be, and it's really fun. Yeah.
Yeah. When kind of getting back to your original point of like bringing the stories that you grew up with, like to different audiences and people who might not be familiar with it. I mean, as soon as you said a bunny and a turtle, I thought of the old story, like the tortoise and the hare. And I thought like, oh, these stories kind of go across cultures. And then you said something like completely different than, that story of the race between the two
Yes.
animals. And so I think that can be like a really wonderful entry point as well, where it's like people know that this is going to be about these two animals, but then it's like, oh, but it's like a new way of thinking about it.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not just like your Korean heritage that you draw on. It seems like you draw on like your own personal experiences, emotions that you have. the people in your life that, I'm thinking of your piece about the pipes bursting
I
specifically, but there's more examples, of course. So, I mean, what do you think draws you to those kinds of narratives? Like, kind of, you mentioned earlier, like keeping, uh, kind of looking at your pieces as like a diary almost. What keeps you coming back to that way of composing?
So when I'm just trying to, let's say, write a piano sonata, just abstract piece of music, I would struggle a lot to kind of like convey this piece as like me. I would think like anybody can write a piano sonata, but I think it really helps me to kind of write about what I know, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah.
And I think that helps me to also be very organic, like I'm writing about my own experiences, and no other person will experience the same thing exactly the same as me, right? So even this like freeze that we had in Houston, I had bizarre set of experiences and events that happened because of the freeze. And so, but because it was going to be premiered in Houston, I thought this was something that I could bring a lot of people to understand, but also share my own experience. It's always like fun to talk about like, oh my God, like how crazy was that? And then like, yeah, I didn't have this. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like because like my experiences in my life of course are very personal and very specific, but it's nothing that other people don't go through, right? Like the common thing would be like a breakup. We all have gone through a breakup and we feel it. And so something like that, or like a trip that's very memorable, like things like that, I think it's easy to pull inspirations from my own experiences, and also be that helps me to be really honest about my music.
Are there any examples that you can think of where, maybe after a concert where one of these pieces were programmed and like someone came up to you afterwards and they were like, I totally relate, or they kind of like share in those feelings that you shared through your music? Has that happened?
Absolutely, yeah. That happens quite often. And it's funny because sometimes like they would have these like wild interpretations of things that I didn't really think about, or like, oh, this sounded like this. And I was like, oh, I guess, oh, yeah, okay. But like, I think sometimes the title gives out more than like
Yeah.
anything else too. And my titles can be very specific, like the pipes piece, for example. But recently I wrote a piece called Cynthia, and that was about, so it was commissioned by my violist friend Tanya, and it was to sort of celebrate the life of her aunt Cynthia, who lost her life over um, breast cancer. And we met her friends who were big supporters while she was ill. And we did interviews, and it was sort of like a piece that I had to imagine who Cynthia might have been based on the interviews. And she was an extremely strong, independent woman, but also like with such a kind, beautiful heart. And that piece, sometimes I still think about like, oh, what can I do to like make this section like cool? Like, what's the texture that I'm going for? But this piece, I really just didn't think about any of that, but wanted to just write a beautiful melody that had no this like flurries, musical flurries. And it was it meant a lot to me when Tanya played it through, and she was nearly in tears. Like I think it's really special when you can have musical connections like that, and it's very raw, and you both feel it, but we can't verbalize it.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you talk about, this kind of difference between focusing on something cool and textural, and I totally get that. And then sometimes like it just warrants, something beautiful and simple. And like how do we know what's right in those situations as composers? I was commissioned to write all of the music for a wedding ceremony, which is like very scary for me. because it's kind of that difference that you're talking about. I really love writing textural, gestural, kind of somewhat high concept music. I don't feel like it's very atonal, but it's definitely not tonal and anything like that. And then to be presented with this opportunity of like a friend wanting me to, it's kind of the same thing. So how do you parse those two things out for yourself? I mean, for sure it's probably like piece to piece, but do you ever have to like grapple with that within the same piece?
It's really almost like moment to moment when you're working on an orchestra piece, because you can always go for this crazy like firework, like like shimmering stuff, and like everyone loves that. But I also think recently I've been thinking a lot about how people listen to music, right? And I think as composers, also having gone through all these like different schools and having gone through like so many new music concerts, we listen to music very differently. I think we are more open to listening to crazy stuff than anybody else in the world, right? And so we are almost like prone to think that anything is fine, like anything is music. But the general audiences that come to a concert, they are not ready to hear any of that. They come to a concert having a very grid specific idea about what music is and what they want it to sound like. For example, like my parents are good examples, right?
Yeah.
Like they can't handle a lot of music. And I think like writing music that I think I would want to put on while driving and like actually like enjoy listening to, rather than like, oh, that's really cool, like how did they do that, like I think that kind of like shifted in my head that I want to do, like I want to create music that people can listen to, like can listen to, not even like want to, but like something that's listenable and that goes. So I think my music has gotten more and more sort of called like audience friendly,
Yeah.
because I've been getting more performances and I talk to audiences a lot. I'm always curious. And yeah, I kind of think that I'm not so interested in writing music for other composers anymore. We listen to music so differently. We look at scores. I mean, okay,
Yeah,
like a first page should always, like I don't really believe in that anymore. I think yeah, people need to get out of their boxes a little bit more and like think about why they became a composer. Like definitely not to impress other people, like
for
composers.
sure. Yeah. I do think that like as what you're touching on is also it's important to have both of those things in your
Right.
toolbox.
Of course.
And I think a lot about Ryuichi Sakamoto, who's a
Oh yeah.
who recently passed away a couple years ago. His music has been hugely influential on me, and I think part of why that is because and I don't know if this is a thing because he mostly worked in Japan and this is how they view composers because in America I think a composer can be a little bit of a different thing, but it's like I see his credits that are it's like he was doing the really super experimental stuff, but he was also like scoring movies and he was also producing pop albums and he was playing music in like jazz fusion bands, and it's like he was a composer in all of those different ways. And I look at that and I'm like, I think it's important for me to like I want to be that. I don't
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to just like be stuck writing, not stuck. I love doing it, but only write the very experimental stuff for other composers as you say. But
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to do it all and do it
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I think this is why every composer's career looks different and everyone believes in different things. And I think that's cool. Like if you're a banker, there's one job to do, and like everyone does it that way. But yeah, I think for me, it is the most meaningful when I can actually connect to non musicians and like actually have them listen without having all these like preconceived ideas about what new music is.
For sure. You've said that people often tell you that your music sounds like you, which is really interesting to me because I think on one hand I can see like, well, of course, but on the other hand, like I know for myself that there's like, the meme that's like there's two wolves inside of me. Like there's, the very introspective kind of person, and then there's the person I kind of present to the world.
Right.
And so I'm not sure, like I think people get confused sometimes when they hear my music for that reason. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. If people are telling you that your music sounds like you, what do you think they're hearing? And do you also recognize yourself in the sound of your work?
Yeah, I mean, it's like an interesting question. So, um, yeah, I've gotten this a lot where people are like, "Yeah, your music sounds exactly like you," and I think it's because, I mean, I have a lot of energy in general, and I can be pretty chatty, and like I'm always like kind of curious about things, and most of my music is pretty notey. I I
Yeah.
love writing notes, and like I feel like I always need more notes. So I think that, and also my music tends to move fast, like not just like note wise in tempo, but like idea to idea it can kind of bounce. I've been trying to work on that for a long time, develop more, you need less.
That's the
I
hardest part, I
know.
think.
And so I think yeah, it's hard not to be myself in my music and just in general as me living life. I only know me. I'm so bad at also hiding my feelings and emotions. If I
Mm,
don't like something,
yep,
I can just not say anything. Everyone would still know.
yep.
I don't know. Apparently, it shows on my face. So I'm like very transparent person in many ways, and I think it also comes from like me being kind of impatient with like just a listener. As a listener, I like music that moves and goes, and that's why I think I also love jazz. I mean, the harmony is always changing and always like, reinventing itself. So, yeah, I think all those things kind of combined kind of sound like myself in my music. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting you bring up jazz because, I think I saw, like, a lot of the stuff in your bio has kinda touches on jazz a little bit. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how does, like, jazz or this rhythmic drive that you're talking, color and vitality, all of these descriptions I've seen about your music and that I recognize in your music myself. I mean, how do those musical instincts guide your writing process?
Yeah, so I think if I can be born again, I want to be born as jazz musician. I think
Yeah.
jazz music, jazz is just the coolest thing, And I love how the music is alive always. I mean, that's a very like cliche way to say it, but it is. You go see jazz being performed like right in front of your eyes at like a small jazz club, and you feel so alive. People are just like looking at each other and like they're sweating and they're playing all these notes and like piano and like I just love that. I feel like in conservatories we are taught to play in the box. You have to be playing with the metronome, playing the right notes, writing the right notes. Like so much of it has to be about fitting in the box. Even like the way that we write in these softwares, right? In like Dorico, like Finalis, Sibelius, whatever you may use, it's very difficult to write music without bars.
Yeah.
And so I think we're programmed to write in a certain way, think in a certain way, and that's a box. And so I just love how jazz kind of like gets out of that. And I also just love how if you treat it right in jazz, no matter what kind of dissonance you're putting it doesn't sound like that. I just love that, just the way that they think about harmony and like how it comes so naturally. Yeah, I wish I could be a jazz musician, but I don't think I can. I hate practicing.
What is what's the I'm gonna get the quote wrong because it's been so long since I've heard it or thought about it, but like there are no wrong notes in jazz. It's just the way you play it, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I do feel like you can bring that into contemporary concert music, however you define that, where it's like I love just putting notes in that make no s it's like, why does this work?
It's true.
This note shouldn't work in this context, in this piece, but, there it is, I love it, it works. So, I don't have you studied much jazz, or you said you haven't played jazz?
I mean, I like play jazz on my piano, right? Just without like people listening to it. I don't know. I'm always so scared to like play jazz for other people. I feel like it's bad. The way that I'm doing it is like wrong. It's probably because I'm so used to going to school to learn these things, and like I never did that with jazz. I just listened to a lot of jazz, and so I have my own way of like thinking about jazz and like playing it, I guess. But I'm like, I think it's bad. So like, I don't know. I'm very like embarrassed by like jazz and
Oh,
like
I
how much I know, how I can do. Yeah, I can't do
yeah, I don't know. I don't think you should feel that way. I was gonna say, I've said this before on the podcast. I One of the most important things I ever did for my own music, the composing that I do, is I needed credits to fill in undergrad, and so I took jazz piano lessons for a semester. I'm not a pianist, so
Okay.
so it ended up being just like a semester of one-on-one music theory, like jazz theory on the piano, and it totally changed the way I thought about harmony primarily. And so
Mm-mm.
I don't know. I think you should go for it. I think yeah,
Yeah,
if you have an inclination for it in your music anyway. I mean,
it's true. Yeah, and I think being an adult, it's very scary to be bad at something. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to suck. Yeah,
uh, well, it's never too late. So
it's true. It's true.
So one of the questions that I ask everybody, and I always feel like the answer has come up already, but I'll ask you more directly and see what we can get into here. What would you describe as the primary pillars of your creative practice, like the foundation of, your philosophy or your process or style, or anything about your work that is like the common thread,
Mm-mm.
work to work to work.
Yeah, actually, this is something that I've thought about, and I think it's really community for me. I feel like I started having work through having friends, and I mean, we all kind of start this way, but I started with writing for friends. Having gone through these great schools, they all became great musicians. And so they would commission me for another piece, or they would introduce me to another group. I think I've always had this sort of like, okay, so I did this and then that led to this next thing. And so, yeah, I think it wasn't ever just like, oh, now I do this. And I don't know
Yeah,
anybody from here, you know?
right.
So, yeah, it's really about community and writing for other people so that they can sound good rather than to just showcase me in the best way possible. Like when I am writing for, let's say, even a string quartet, I listen to a lot of their recordings and kind of get to know who they are, what they sound good at. And also, I mean, we have two violinists that are completely different. So, depending on who's playing first and second for my piece, I'd write the piece very differently, so yeah, I think it's more people based than anything else.
I think what you're saying is so important, and I don't even know, like, how people do it any other way anymore. Like, I think, like, I don't know, I used to feel very self-conscious about looking back at my, list of performances or commissions, and it's like, so many of the same names over and over again, and I was like, "Oh, I need to, like, I wish someone I didn't know would commission me." But all the people who I haven't known who have commissioned me have been pieces that are like terrible. So I've really come to like recognize the value in, like, this is actually the best possible thing that can happen. Like, this guy I wrote, one of my best friends, I wrote a piece for him, you know, 15 years ago, and he's still asking me for commissions today. That's all I can ask for, you know?
That's dream come true. Exactly. I think, what we do has to come with 100% trust. they can look at what I've done before, but I mean, who knows what I'm gonna do now? You know, I could write completely different thing, or I could write a bad piece. Any of that is true, you know. But I think, okay, so I'm a composer, so I've never really commissioned anybody, but I think this whole idea of commissioning is insane. I
Yeah.
I don't know why they want to do it or how they can do it. It's just like, oh my god, you trust me to do this, and you're gonna like play it no matter what I'm gonna. It's crazy, you know. So we're so lucky that we can do what we do, and that's purely because people just are willing to take the risk. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I've never thought about it. So
Exactly, because like we're composers, we're like, oh my god, like I gotta be commissioned, but like I wouldn't commission. I'll be like, maybe I'll play like that new piece that like somebody else played, and then like I have a recording, you know. But
yeah.
yeah,
And I mean, now that you bring this up, I mean, I've started also recognizing like I don't want to wait for a commission to really write the music I want to write either. Like that's the other part of it. Like that's like the permission slip to do the thing that you want to do, or like getting grant funding. You know, all that stuff is important. You know, we need to be paid. You know, otherwise it's like how do we feed ourselves? But at the same time, it's like when you do foster that community, you can have faith that okay, if I want to actually do something for myself here, make the art that I want to make, no one's going to ask me. I did this recently with my giant piano piece called Tattoo. No one asked me to write that, but you know, I know so many pianists that I have faith that someone will play it, and someone has already, and you know, I'm sure others will as as well as the year kind of unfolds. And um, I think that's also what community means. It's like it gives you the confidence and the insurance, maybe. I don't know. That's a weird word to use, but it allows you to pursue those projects that you really want to pursue and not have to wait for someone to give you permission to do it.
right. Actually, that leads me to this quote that one of my teachers said to me that kind of changed the way that I think about like being a composer. So this was when I was like 24, 23, and this was Richard Danielpour. He's still a great mentor to me, and he told me that nobody gives you a permission to be a composer except for yourself. So you have to just be like, I don't know, you have to wake up and choose to be a composer one day, you know? Yeah, he was like, it's not the doctorate that you're getting, it's not this award, it's you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like following that up, I think it, okay, so this is like something that I really believe in, and I think not a lot of people think this way, but so maybe you know people will hate me for it, but okay, so my violinist friend or pianist friend, if they don't practice for 2 days, they can't do what they did 2 days ago. They practice every single day, especially the ones that are actively performing and have careers and income from that job, right? Violinist, pianist. Composers are the only people who can just go without opening their files, thinking about composing. I mean, we always feel guilty about not composing, but we can go days, months, weeks without composing, and we're still like, oh yeah, I'm a composer. I think that, at least for me, doesn't work. I even if I'm writing bad measures, I have to still compose. And especially these days, I've been kind of like taking it as a 9 to 5. I don't compose over the weekends. I need those days off.
Yeah.
But Monday to Friday, I compose every single day. Even if it's like a brief moment, I do it. Because before, you know, like I was thinking, oh, well, I don't have like ideas. I'm too tired. There are always excuses for not composing. That could be the easiest thing that I can come up with. Excuses for not composing. But just being active in writing and creating and just being in that zone all the time, I think is so important. Yeah, the consistency of it. It's like going to the gym, you know? I hate going to the gym, but I do it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I do agree. I'm also not great at, like, staying on top of it every day because of my day job, but at any rate, um, eh, I do also think that I don't know, it's so complicated because
Mm-hmm.
you get better at composing by composing. It is like an actual practice, like and I've told students I've had, like, "You have to practice composing the way you practice an instrument." But also, I have a mentor who he's really instilled in this idea in me, because I'm an artist and a creator, I can make anything I do in my life an act of creativity
Mm-hmm.
too. So, um, I think I don't know, it's being an artist is complicated.
It is, and it looks different for everybody, like I've
Yeah,
said several times. But I mean, me doing it this way definitely also creates some sort of sacrifices, right? Like, for example, I have a doctorate, but I'm not really looking for an academic job right now because having, like you said, like a day job or like an academic job, it would just steer away from all my time and energy, right? I mean, teaching is really energy consuming. You're looking, I used to teach a lot more in Houston, and a full day of teaching, you're talking, you're looking at other people's music. The last thing you want to do is to write your own music. You're so done with music, and also new music, historical, whatever. I don't want to look at screens. So I've definitely reduced the number of students. I'm a little bit more selective about how I spend my daytime, and that's allowing me to write more music. So I don't know. I think it's all like choices, and I am very fortunate that I can do it this way. I'm definitely aware of that. But I mean, even when I was younger, I think sometimes I would just like stay up all night and like not sleep for days so that I can write more music, because there was a teacher, I mean, he wasn't like a great teacher, but I think knowing what you're good at and your strengths are, it's very important, And he was telling me that one of my strengths is that I can make decisions very quickly. Maybe it's a bad
yeah,
thing in life, but I don't know. I'm very decisive,
mm,
and I think that shows in my music. I can write very fast. It may be bad, but like I would rather make that mistake and also come back to it the next day and then see why that doesn't work. So he was like really pushing me to produce a lot of music, which wasn't what he would always do to other students. So I think it's important to me that I am active in writing.
yeah.
Yes.
I think I had a question for you about work-life balance, and I think you are in the middle of answering it, but I'll ask the question anyway so we can maybe ground this conversation more into that topic. And basically, before we met, you shared with me, you've been wanting to live a more balanced life, especially while you do juggle so many commissions and premieres. And so, what does that balance look like for you right now? You mentioned taking weekends off and setting things up like a 9 to 5. So maybe that's part of the answer, but maybe there's more. And how do you protect it when everything does start to move? Like, things get overwhelming, things move fast.
So before getting married and living with my husband, I had only really known musicians all my life. And I think musicians are, I mean, it's impossible to have any sort of healthy routine as a musician. We practice, we compose, and then all our shows are at night, and then you go out to drink. I mean, where's health in that? And you just go, go, go all the time. And the big difference between being a musician versus a normie is that when a normie comes home, he or she doesn't think about the work that they just did. They're done, and then they do whatever they want to do or not do anything. But musicians, we're just, I don't know, like submerged in this.
Yeah.
Our identity is tied to music, how we're doing in music world. It is so tiring, just exhausting to even just exist sometimes being a musician. So meeting Nate, my husband, and also were living together with my brother Justin. He also had a very regular 9 to 5. But I mean, inside note, he quit that 9 to 5. It was a great job, but he quit after living with me. I influenced him. Now he's a yeah, now he's a ceramicist. Like it's horrible what I've done, but he had a great job in this economy. But anyway,
Yeah.
they went to work regardless of the weather, how they felt, they were whatever. They went to work every single day and did whatever they were required to do every single day. And I was like, oh my God, like I had never seen this before. Like you go at 8, you know? And so I was like, huh, like what if I compose like that? And so I think like that's been, I mean, it's like an ongoing experiment to figure out what works and, what I can do to survive as a person, not just a composer. But also, I think learning and realizing that there's so much more than just the music world really helped me, because if you go through all these music schools and you just hang out with musicians all the time, music becomes life or death. I really think that, like depending on how you're doing that week, that month, career wise, performance, whatever, you can feel like the worst person in the world. And you're like, oh my God, I don't deserve to live, which is crazy. Like, why is it that like music schools like train you like that? I
Right.
think there should be like a reformation about this. But realizing that this isn't life or death really helped me, which like sounds crazy, but like yeah, I was like, huh, like even if I don't get as many commissions this year, I'm not a terrible person. Wow, like what a surprise, but like knowing that really helped me. And I tried not to think about my music and career after the working hours. After dinner, I try to just kind of shut off my brain a little bit. That's really helped me. And also, I used to email back before the email even came. Like I was so like connected and I was just like, okay, like what's next? But now I've trained to just like not do that and slow down a little bit in my life in many ways. And so that's also helped me. I don't know. I'm just trying to like create a little bit more breathing room. Wow, I just like had to breathe right there. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get it. And you mentioned before about how marrying someone outside of the music world has given you this new perspective and almost like a kind of peace of mind. And
Yes.
I'm interested in like kind of exploring this topic a little more because as a composer myself, I'm married to another composer,
Oh my God, you're one of
and
those.
and and funny enough, you bring up your brother doing ceramics. Susanna also does ceramics, so
Oh
she's
wow.
now like making a living as a she has commissions, and then she also has ceramics, and it's like a really beautiful life, I think. But anyway, I'm sure there's a lot to talk about here, but we like I hesitate to even say this in a public forum, but we will just like really make fun of people who are like sending these crazy emails at times, and it's like, why are people doing that? So like we've learned to kind of create those boundaries on our own, and we hold each other accountable. Like don't reply to that. Like you don't have to. It's 9 p.m. on a Sunday, you do not have to reply to that.
Exactly.
But you're right, like the fact that we're even just like having to like, okay, I'm like, let's hold each other accountable with our boundaries, I think says a lot about like the training we all receive, right?
Yes. Yeah, because you can compose, you can practice at any hour, and being a composer is basically like running a small business, right? But with no hours. And I don't think it's sustainable at all. It's no. And also, you can always teach more, you can always write more, you can always write more emails. Oh my gosh, like it's never going to be enough anyway. So I don't know. I think it's important to live your life
Yeah.
and do things that bring you joy, Like I love cooking, I love baking. Sometimes I just have to go away from my computer and not be so connected. Yeah.
If you'd like to support this work directly, Patreon is the sole source of income for Loose Leaf Transmissions. It's what makes the time, equipment, and ability to say yes to more conversations and better programming possible. And if you're not ready for ongoing support, you can also leave a one-time tip on coffee. You'll find both options at looseleaftransmissions.com/support. And thanks so much for supporting this work. So you said that your husband has helped you kind of rethink the structure of your day-to-day life, but has any but has he changed like any way that you see your career or even like the role of music in your life?
So I mean, just like seeing his routine. So he didn't help me see it. I just saw it. I
Okay.
was like, oh my God, how is he like
It's like an
living like that?
accident.
Exactly. It's just like I don't believe it. At first I thought he was just like joking. He goes to the gym, he works out every single morning. Like he wakes up at 6. Like, what? Like I used to go to bed at 6. But yeah, just living life as a normal adult, I was like, wow, so this is how you do it. And you get a salary and it's nice. But yeah, I think so. He's a very musical person. So when we first met, we bonded over his passion for music. So he took opera lessons and he's a singer. He played cello growing up. So he was very involved in music and also the arts. Like he loves reading. He was in like plays. So he actually might have more performance experience than me, which is funny. I think it's also funny that because we're pursuing music as a career, sometimes I hate music. I just hate music, I love it, but sometimes this is what makes me so like suffer. And
Yeah.
like when I'm composing and like it's just not going well, I'm like, "Oh my God, like I hate music." But when you don't pursue it and you keep enjoying music, you end up really loving music and in like a very different way than we love music. It's just like this like love hate battle for us, but like for them it's just like something to escape to. Oh my God, so I was like, wow, like maybe this is like also something that I can think about, like my own relationship with music, also just like looking at like a human level, right? What I was doing before I met Nate was absolutely unhealthy. I would write all night. So I would start around like 10 p.m. or so because I would always like have concerts to go to or I would go out, hang out. So I would start kind of late and I would write until I have to crash, like 6 a.m., 7 a.m. And like my brain is just done and like my eyes are like watering. Then I'll go to sleep.
Yeah.
And then I would only like maybe once a day drink coffee all day, like the regular composer life. And how is that good? It's just not. So yeah, I'm trying to like still create a healthy way of like living as a person and still write a lot of music. And yeah, I think it's an ongoing experiment as a composer.
Do you notice? I mean, it's hard to like really measure what better means, but that's the only word I can think to use here. But do you find that your music has become better in some ways now that you're like focusing on these healthier approaches, or is that still part of the experiment?
So I think my music has definitely gotten a little bit brighter, maybe. I
Oh,
think.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think I just had a lot of like struggles within myself before I met Nate, just about like career and how I was treating music. And yeah, it was, I had a lot of like anxiety. And all that has been, not all, but like a lot of it has been lifted with this new way of looking at music, me not like fighting for it like I used to. And so I think my music may be a little bit I don't know, easier to listen to. That's what my dad said, actually. He was like, your recent music, I can listen to them. I was like, is that a good thing?
That's I almost mentioned this earlier. Neither of my parents are musicians, but they of course support what I'm doing, and I don't know what this meant. I still don't exactly know. I think I know what it means, but before I went to grad school, my mom described my music as, "Oh, this sounds like it could be in a romance movie." And now she's like, "Oh, your music sounds like it could be in a horror movie." And I'm like, what does that mean?" She's like, "I wish you'd write music that was nicer." I'm like,
I
"Oh,
know. Don't
oh
they
yeah,
all wish that, you know?
yeah,
We all wish that too. But I think that's also an interesting thing. So when people listen to our music, they always want to connect to something that they know, right? They can't just be like, "Oh yeah, this is so." But they're like, "It sounds like something." This is something that like we always get as living composers, I think. This comparison to what they know, and yeah.
exactly." I will say, when I said that I was married to a composer, you were like, "Oh, you're one of those people," and we try really hard not to be one of those people. But
Uh,
it is nice that we recognize that, and we tend to not talk about music with each other.
that's so good.
Unless one of us is like very deep in the process and kind of stuck, and then we'll be like, "Hey, would you look at this? What do you think about this?" And that's been like really valuable. We have a friend who said that "Oh, you live with a private lesson teacher," and it's like, I don't think either of us want that actually, but it is nice to, we can tap into each other if we need to. But what we are missing, which maybe you have, is you can get the perspective of someone who is not like deep in the music, and I'm sure that is just as valuable, if not more valuable.
Yes, it's actually been great in many ways because he thinks what I do is so amazing, right? Like I used to just be around composers all the time that I never thought what I did was so special or different. I'm like, well, everyone's a composer, but it is like okay, so I would write something and I would show it to Nate, and he's like, "Babe, that's beautiful." Like that's like what I get, you know. And I'm like, "Of course, it's beautiful." You know, I love that. Just like just I don't know, vague compliments. I think sometimes that's just like what you need, not like that violin line. Like does that? I mean, I'm thinking about the violin line anyway, so I just want somebody to be like, "You're doing great," you know.
Right, right.
So the world is scary out there, so I don't know. I like this like vague compliments, but sometimes he would give comments that are very sharp because he's just a listener. So for example, I was writing this beginning of a piece and I played it for him. He was like, "Is there something else before that?" And I was like, "What
Oh,
do you mean?" And he was like,
yeah.
it didn't sound like a beginning." And I was like, "Why?" And then he was like, "I don't know, it just like started." And I was like, "Huh." And then I actually like extended a little bit with like something that like kind of like gets it going. And he was like, "Oh yeah, this sounds like a beginning." So yeah, I think it can be interesting.
Yeah, I like that. That's cool.
Yeah.
So one of the other questions that I ask everybody is basically like, what has really inspired you, over time? And so what is a piece of music, a song, a film, a book, a piece of art, basically like any kind of artistic artifact that has changed the way you thought about your work? And it can be more than one, and it could be music, it could be not.
Yeah, so I saw this question and I thought that was so difficult to answer.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to like pick just one.
And it changes a lot, so I recognize that.
Exactly. But I thought an easier one to talk about is Symphony Fantastique.
Oh, yeah.
Because also like my Instagram handle is like Berlioz girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
Um, as we all do, I learned about the piece when I was in a music history class. And, I hated music history class. Nobody likes music history classes. It's always early too. So they were introducing like programmatic music. And like Berlioz did it in the most like it's so raw, and like he wrote his own program note. I mean, this piece is crazy for when it was written. And before that era, I think like, Beethoven's great, sure, but like a lot of the music that was covered in music history class was like, ugh, what is this? Like it all sounds the same. But this piece had like my attention completely, and I was like, oh wow, you can be like so raw about your expression and like be so like, I don't know, almost like detailed and like personalized about like your program note. I love that. So I think that's been a piece that's been in my thought process a lot when I'm writing and writing program notes, especially because I write a lot about like my life and also like
Yeah.
storytelling pieces. Yeah.
Yeah, that I love that piece, and, like, as you've said, it's like anytime I, like, kinda come back to it and research it a little because we do play it on the radio quite a bit, and I love talking about it because it's like, how often do you get to talk about classical music where a guy, like, takes a bunch of opium and, like, has these fever dreams about, like, this person who doesn't love him? Like,
I
that's
know.
that's like that's like a soap opera. But it was written in, like, 1830? I just had to look it up, by the way.
So
It's, like,
old.
crazy.
And I know. And also when you listen to it, it's some parts are really ridiculous. It's so loud. It just goes and goes, and like I just love how unapologetic he is about like his own musical ideas. I feel like if I were writing that, I would be like, oh, maybe this is a little bit much. And I would maybe like take out two measures or like something, but he's just like at it.
Yeah.
And then the head being chopped off and everything. I mean, that's like,
Yeah.
who doesn't like that? So I like that piece a lot.
Yeah, I will say I was gonna ask you about your Instagram handle because I've always found it, like, really funny, Berlioz's girlfriend. I mean, it's so great. Is it only because of Symphony Fantastique or
That's
I
right.
mean, that's
Yeah.
it. I love
Yeah.
that.
Because, like it's nice to be like, I guess it's also not nice to have like somebody who's like so obsessed with you. And like,
Yeah,
but yeah, barely his girlfriend. I'm the idée fixe.
yeah. Um, so you kinda touched on this earlier when we were talking about Gabriella Elena Frank and, how that was the first time you met someone, like, you kinda saw, like, oh, like, a woman can be a composer, and so I imagine that you think a lot about how you can kind of pay that forward to other composers yourself. So as an Asian woman and a composer working in spaces that haven't always made room for your voice or for the voices of people like you, how do you think about using your platform or your music to say something, especially like these days, like 2025?
Not just Asian women, but I think women's stories have been told by men for too many centuries. Like we've been seen and be told by people who can't quite capture it. Like Schumann wrote that whole song cycle about women's life. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. It's a great song cycle, but thank you,
Yeah.
but no thanks. So I actively try to collaborate with female artists and artists who are like me, Korean artists. But one of the projects that I felt, I mean, there are so many projects that I've worked with, like Korean women and whatnot. But one piece really kind of like opened my eyes, and that was my violin concerto home. And that was in collaboration with Mary Grace Johnson, who's my best friend and also a violinist. And she and I collaborated with the Women's Home in Houston. And it's a facility for women with addiction and homelessness. And we interviewed three graduates from that program, and they all told us their journeys and stories. And I mean, we were in tears, really. Like it was incredible to learn the importance of people, community. Like also like you have to really believe in yourself to overcome something like that. And so based on those interviews, I wrote this piece, and it was choreographed by a female choreographer. And so I mean, it was a very difficult project for me also because I had to honor those stories and really tell it in a way that was respectful. And so Yeah, I mean, I love working with stories I think should be told by women. Also, this recent piece that I did with the Albany Symphony. It was Albany Symphony was like, so what do you want to write? And I was like, can I write a guitar concerto? And it was for my best friend, Bo. She's like this crazy superstar guitarist. She can do anything and above. And so we had worked on several pieces before, like chamber and solo, but I mean, I really try to honor these performers and their hard work and their life and really showcase them in the best way possible. I my ego basically had to be gone for that piece. I was like, what can I do to like bring Bo up? So I think it's really about like bringing each other up too. So I send other people's music to like conductors and like performers a lot too, like composers that I love and I believe in, and they may be just slightly younger than me or something,
Yeah,
you know?
sure.
And I don't think things like that really happened for me, at least. It was so much of it was like, oh, if I get it, you won't get it. Like, so like nobody was really like helping each other. So I am so interested in creating this sort of like environment where we lift each other up in the music world rather than to crush somebody so that you can go further. Like, what does it even mean to go further, And this is something that I learned from being around normies. Nobody knows us anyway. This fame that we think we have, this success that we think we have, it's so arbitrary. Like, I'm not gonna be Taylor Swift no matter what. I'm just not. And so I'm very passionate about being remembered as a friend and a good person just as much as I want to have my music performed. And so none of this like sabotaging stuff. I think that's so bad. Yeah.
My initial thought was to kind of ask you a similar question that I asked earlier in response to the music you write, which is, what kind of response have you gotten from audiences encountering, these stories through your music? But you mentioned like lifting up the people the performers that you're writing the music for. I mean, so maybe that's my question: is what has their response been like? I mean, I can imagine not every commission that people ask for or have the opportunity to work with a composer on, certainly those moments might be few and far between for them.
Mm. Yeah. So I think I was able to have this sort of like work and like commissions and whatnot because of how I was received by the performers rather than the composers. I mean, there are some composers who win every competition there is. I wasn't that at all. But my music has been like, I don't know, I think like performers really love to play my music also because of the proximity to the audience and the listeners, right? Like
Yeah.
it's yeah, so yeah, it's very important to me to think about who I'm writing for, who's going to listen to, what space it's going to be. And this is something that Samuel Adler said in a forum that I was at. And he said, it's so important to envision what you want to hear. So let's say we're writing for this random violinist, right? Like a famous violinist. He goes on the stage, people clap, and he goes down bow, what's he play?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, really seeing what they can be on the stage is our job, right?
Yeah.
And we never want to make them look bad. We want to, at least, like, I think it's important to showcase them in the best way possible. So
Yeah.
that's my focus. Yeah.
Kind of in the same vein, you've described loving collaborations, especially ballet and dance, where movement and music come together. You mentioned the Stuttgart Ballet earlier. I'm sure there's plenty more that you've worked with. So, what do you think that you learn about yourself as a composer when you're creating in dialogue with other artists? Not necessarily like just music for music, music's
Mm-hmm.
sake, you know?
Yeah, so being a composer, you're always kind of isolated.
Yeah.
You're in a quiet room, not talking to anybody, your phone's on silent, you know? So I am a pretty social person, and that's like, I don't know, it's sometimes very hard to have this sort of isolation for so long and not being able to have another brain to kind of pick from.
Yeah.
Like you just go with what you know, and I guess YouTube.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I love sort of having the support and like somebody to kind of ask questions while I'm creating. It's like, do you like this? Do you want this longer? Like, do you think it will work? Just like having another body and like another brain to pick from, I think it's great. And also working with choreographers is fascinating. They listen to music so
Oh
differently,
yeah.
and the things that they use in order to create their movement and their piece, I mean, it's so different than what I would imagine, you know? I'd be like, also, first of all, like they count in a very bizarre way. Everything is in four. It's crazy. Like I could write in like seven and they're still counting in four. It's crazy. Also, they're listening for like events rather than like the whole scope or like a line or something. Like they're like, okay, there's a bang and you come. It's more like it's almost like an animalistic instinct of like listening to music and like reacting with your body, and I think that's just so cool because even if like a performer, like a musician, is very very expressive in their physical language, you're still holding a violin, you're sitting in front of a piano. It's very like a composed way of creating the sound. But with human bodies, dancers, they can do anything and everything. So that's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the example, I mean, to your point about, sitting and playing violin, the example that came to my mind, like the difference is I grew up doing a lot of marching band.
Oh.
And, that is very like pulse. Like you have to be, there's the metronome like banging away on a football field and when you're practicing and so like pulse oriented. And you're right. Like so much about dance is, I mean, maybe there's a pulse. I mean, like you said, there's like a confusing mystery about there's the way they think about time. But I did have an opportunity. I've had a couple opportunities to work with choreographers, and my first time was when I was in grad school. I was working with a student dancer, and because I'm a composer, I was way behind on the project, and a composer and a student, I should say. And they ended up starting the choreography before any music existed,
How's
and
that
so
possible?
I don't. So I guess what ended up happening was she would send me video clips and I would score the movement I saw, and I think that is what led me to think more about gesture in my music and movement in these ways that dancers think about them. I mean, this is a hugely valuable experience. But yeah, I was like, how are they doing this? Like they don't know what the music's going to sound like, but they're just moving around and, you know. So in a way it made my life easier, I think. It made it very easy to like get the music out, but that's interesting. What's been a memorable piece for dancers that you have worked on?
So I'm actually creating one right now. It is for Ballet Collective, and the premiere is in 2 weeks, in a week, something like that. It's very soon. This was a very cool project because I had two collaborators. It wasn't just a choreographer, but we also worked with a visual artist. And the whole sort of like the way that Ballet Collective works is very interesting. So you're paired. So choreographer comes first, and then the choreographer chooses the composer, and then from talking to one another, you pick another source artist. Could be from any field, but not dance or music. So we picked Lynn Myers, who's this incredible visual artist, and through our conversations, the source artist has to create whatever work first. And then from that, I get inspired and get inspiration and then write the music and then the choreography. And then we have a workshop period where we can kind of try things out. and then we revisit the piece. So it's like this like ongoing process of like really dissecting how to create. And it was really just so fascinating. And yeah, especially in this time, I guess like it was very, I don't know, it helped me a lot to have collaborators who were a little bit more ahead of me life wise. Like they're both women, but they're both mothers, and they still have these like amazing careers. And I mean, these are like super women that I'm working with,
Yeah.
right? And so having their support and encouragement, it's been the world to me. And I feel like every time I have collaborators, I create something that I wouldn't necessarily have without them, which I think is great. You know, I'm like growing and like I'm thinking outside of my own little box. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So you've just had this like incredible run lately of orchestral premieres and commissions and concerti, the ballet collaboration you're talking about. I mean, I feel like every time I open Instagram and see like your story, it's like, wow, Nikki's killing it. So I'm like really curious, when you zoom out a little bit, out of all of these things happening, I mean, what feels most creatively alive for you right now? I mean, like, what is like the kinds of projects that like you just, I know it's like trying to pick your favorite child probably, but like the ones that get you super excited about, you know, you get to be a composer.
Right. Okay. So it's like excitement comes with so much anxiety and like I mean, I think it's like complicated, right?
Yeah.
Like of course like I love these like orchestral works that I'm creating, but sometimes I can't sleep. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I'm writing for this orchestra, and like, oh my gosh, like is it gonna work? Like I think about that a lot. And something that I've been doing, because I had a therapist like way before when I was at Rice, and I would have all this anxiety about like, oh my god, I don't think I could do this. And this is a great tip for all composers. You should have like an appreciation day for yourself. And what you do is, when I have this sort of like anxiety about like, oh my gosh, like this piece is gonna suck, everyone's gonna hate me, blah, then you're supposed to listen to some of your favorite pieces of yours, like from the past, and then you have a track record of like, well, I've done it before, so how
Yeah.
bad could it really be?
Right.
But I've been really excited about, of course, the Atlanta Symphony commission. And I mean, this is by far the biggest commission I've had. And I'm so excited to be featured with Jennifer Coe. And I mean, it's a great program. And so I mean, I sometimes think about like how lucky I am, and like how lucky, like how I got so lucky to be doing all this. But also, yeah, great anxiety, great like, stress. I don't know how I'm doing all this. And also another concert that I'm really excited about is the piece that I'm writing for Orchestra Lumos. It's orchestra in Connecticut, but it's featured with so it's the concert is basically like celebrating America's birthday, the big birthday. And we're commissioned for orchestra piece, but it's with four other composers, and it's Christopher Diaphanidis and Clarice Assad and Liam Cunnings and Quinn Mason. And I mean, it's like such a good group of composers. And I'm so excited to be a part of this, but also like totally scared that like, what if I write a therapy piece? We all have that
Oh yeah.
concern.
Yeah.
And I don't think composers are, I don't know, brave enough, or like we're all too egotistic to say that we're so afraid. We're always like, yeah, it's gonna be great. But like, I don't know. I'm scared.
Well, to your point, I mean, when I say creatively alive, I think, I mean that, yeah, that includes like excitement, anxiety, and fear, I guess.
Oh, 100% fear.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. I get it, and it's so hard to like compartmentalize those feelings. It's like, I too had a therapist one time, for a while, and just the tools that she gave me to deal with that kind of stuff. I wasn't even seeing her about my creative work. It's just, those things come up, and just like how important it is to like acknowledge like, okay, these feelings of anxiety and being a little afraid of something is your body trying to protect you from
Mm,
the unknown, perhaps, these new experiences. And it's okay to like acknowledge them and thank them, like, thank you for doing your job. And but like, I got this. Like,
yes.
I got it. And I mean, it's, I don't know if that ever goes away. It's just we have different coping mechanisms like that to deal with it.
Absolutely. And also, I keep thinking the reason why I'm so scared and that I'm so anxious is because I care, right? If I
Yeah.
didn't care, who cares, right? But
Right. Exactly.
yeah, I mean, I talked about how I try not to think of it as life or death, but sometimes I still do. I mean, it's so directly connected to me. It's my music. And if it doesn't go the way that I envisioned, of course, like it's very difficult to just kind of like accept and let go. But yeah, I think luckily I've recently had a lot of opportunities to write bigger pieces that I got to like try things and kind of like learn what works and what doesn't for my music. And so
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, getting into my final set of questions, these are questions that I ask everybody, and it's always interesting to see, the differences between everyone, but also like similarities. I mean, a lot of people kind of feel the same way about these. So, starting off with, what do you think you would be doing if it wasn't composing? If it was something else artistic, or even something totally non-artistic?
I think I would either be a chef or a baker. Yeah.
Yeah,
But at the same time, I don't know. I kind of don't want to be doing anything. Just kind of chill, hang out. Some people just do that. And
yeah,
I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, so
yeah.
maybe like I don't know, rich unemployed person. I would
Rich and
love that, but I don't think that's possible.
yeah.
Yes.
I don't know. I think if I was rich and unemployed, I'd still be doing like music. That's the
I
sad
would,
part.
I would, I don't know. I think if music weren't a choice, I
Okay.
would
Yeah.
love to just hang out. I love hanging out. Yeah, do
Yeah.
nothing, sit by the beach. There's so many things to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I did notice you do a lot of cooking. And
Yes.
I mean, what's your favorite dish to make? Like if it's just an everyday, weekday kind of dish.
So I change it up a lot, but of course I make a lot of Korean food because I'm
Yeah.
Korean. But lately I've been making a lot of Thai food, which has been really fun. So my
Yeah.
neighbor Nick Benavides, he also lives not too far from me in Long
Yeah.
Beach. So he has this like crazy garden, and I've been getting like his Thai basil and
Oh,
whatnot.
yeah.
So
That's what I've been seeing. Yeah,
yes.
I had him on the podcast a couple months ago,
Oh,
and we
cool.
talked about his garden, and we talked about this, but from his perspective. And like at the time, he was giving tomatoes away, and that's something. Susanna grows tomatoes and herbs, and we're always giving stuff to people. So, um, yeah, it's exciting to like get something from a friend and then be able to like put it to good use.
Absolutely. And yeah, I just like baked him a loaf and we do a little like, neighboring exchange. So it's fun.
That's cool. I need to move to Long Beach and hang out with you.
Definitely. I mean, you can't beat this weather. It's great.
Yeah, yeah, I do love the weather there. What are you trying to get better at in your creative life right now?
So many things. But I wish there was like a way for me to have these like little concerns that I get from just daily composing and existing. Like I think learning more about orchestration, like stuff like that. That's like obvious, right? And
Right.
like, that's easy to achieve. But I am definitely hoping to learn a way to pursue this career and still have a happy life as a person. I think that's really my main concern these days. Also, because I recently got married and I am interested in having a family. And so when you look at the music world, it's very rare to see a composer who has a family, who has a great career, who has a very active writing like it's very like hard to juggle, you know? And so trying to see what that also looks like. And yeah, I have just a lot of like concerns about being a composer. It's not an easy thing. Yeah. And we all get this like anxiety of like, oh, what if like I don't get commissions anymore, you
Right.
know? And there's nothing that I can do to control that. And I think those are the hard things that I am thinking about. Yeah, cuz if it were under my control, it would be done. Like I'm very quick about acting on things. So like if I want to learn something, I learn. But yeah, things that I have no control over, those are the things that I wish were better.
Yeah. No, I get that. I get that. Is there a tool that you use in your practice that you think everyone should know about and that everyone else could benefit from? This could be like an actual object tool, it could be a software, a process that you use, anything like that.
Years ago, I told myself one day that I'm never gonna be stuck again in my
Okay.
music.
Yeah.
And because like it's a weird thing. Like we've all had this like writer's block, but it's what I've created. Why should I be stuck? Like I got so like upset about it. And I was like, okay, like no more of this. So what I do to get out of it is I write maybe like 3 to 4 different options. And it could be so bad, it doesn't matter. Just write. And then kind of reevaluate why you don't like it and listen to it over and over. And I think that gives you a better idea about how to go on than to just closing the program and not looking at it for days. Yeah. Like actually like face the problem. I think that's yeah, an important process for me at least. And
Yeah.
everyone should try.
Yeah, I think we all like when we're deep in the process of writing something, it's like really easy to tell like, "Oh, this isn't right. Something's wrong with this. This is bad. I hate this. I don't want this to be part of the piece." And because writing music or making any kind of art is such a vulnerable act, it's really easy to like be emotional in those moments. Like, oh, this is like not good. This is, I'm like feel really bad about it. But I like that idea of like taking a step back and being more objective about it,
Yes,
which
yes.
is really hard to do.
I know
So
we're always in our own head,
yeah,
especially composing. Yeah, so hard.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So my final question, and this might you might have already answered this somewhere along the way, but I'll ask you directly. What is something that you've never had a chance to say about your art that you have always wanted to share with people?
Hmm. Well, that's an interesting question. I feel like I'm pretty like direct about like what I want to say, and
I was
like
gonna say, yeah.
if I want to say it, I just say it. Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like if there's something that I want to talk about, I will, and I have. I don't know. Maybe I can't answer this question in like a good, cool way, but I've said it, you know? If I wanted to say it, I've said it.
You're not the first person to answer it that way, which I
Okay,
appreciate.
cool.
So I will accept, and that
Cool.
is cool. That is very cool of you to be that way.
Yeah, actually, so I was out yesterday having a beer with my husband, and we were like just having this like funny conversation about like, okay, like, how would you describe my personality? And the first thing that he said was that I'm confident and like, of course, like I'm confident about the things that I'm confident about, but also the things that I don't know. Apparently, I'm very confident about like why I don't know.
Mm,
And
yeah,
I am not like ashamed. And it's just like it's kind
yeah.
of true. It's like, for example, I don't know how to swim. And when people are like, "Oh, like how come you don't know how to swim?" It's like, I don't feel bad about it. I'm like, "Well, when do I need to swim?
Yeah,
Like, why?"
yeah.
So, yeah, I think If I wanted to say something in my music, I have.
It's been said. Yeah.
It's
Love that.
there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, Nikki, this was so much fun. It's been so great getting to know you after getting to know your music the way that I have over the past few years. And so I just really appreciate your time today. And if I'm ever in Long Beach, I'll let you guys know so I can have stuff from Nick's garden and your Thai food. I don't know.
Absolutely. Nick and Nikki, we're here.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me.
So much gratitude to Nikki for joining me for this episode of Music Maker. And I have to say, I absolutely love how deliberately she has built and continues to build a creative life around joy and community, not as a luxury, but as a condition for just doing the work well. I find it all to be quite clarifying myself. You can learn more about Nicky Sohn and her music through the links in the show notes. I'm Tyler Kline. Thanks so much again for joining me for this episode of Music Maker. The show is produced by Loose Leaf Transmissions, made for all ears. You can explore more episodes and find ways to support the work at looseleaftransmissions.com. Thanks again for listening. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you back here next time. If this has been your first time listening to Music Maker, well, good news. There are over 40 episodes in the archive. I've also got a companion show called Micromaker with short excerpts from these interviews, with new episodes releasing multiple times each week. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss anything, follow both shows on whatever app that you're using. Thanks again for listening.